I have a special invitation now for everyone here, and that is that we all gather again in 100 years' time. We'll be in spirit, but
Maybe.
let's, how many are willing to make that commitment? And we'll just look down on the earth plane and see how they're doing. And if we all multiply James's efforts, I mean, Bill and I were talking today and we figured he probably was only really praying for divine love about 9 years, 8 years of receiving those messages, and 9 years of praying for divine love. How many here have been praying for divine love more than 9 years? Anybody? Anybody? So imagine, just imagine what can happen in the next 100 years, and we will all be part of it. So thank you, Dennis and Bill and Cliff and Al and James and who was then after James was
Jesus.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, Jesus. I'm sorry. And then Yogananda,
And Confucius.
then Confucius, then Helen, and we're going to change the numbers. In another 100 years, the numbers are going to change, right? But we hope you can all stay. But to those of you who are leaving now, we thank you for your prayers, adding to this beautiful time. And my husband's giving me a look.
Well, I have to
He
leave
needs to
momentarily.
be excused for a few minutes. So
maybe some of you want a break.
Maybe some of you would like a little pit stop. But I would like to open up the discussion. I'm so happy that Dennis and Bill and Cliff are able to stay. And I loved what Al was referring to. Would any of the three of you like to step up and start our discussion by saying how you found the Padgett messages?
I would like to make one comment. I thought it was very fitting that Jesus followed Padgett today, because today we celebrate 100 years of James passing into spirit, but tomorrow, the 18th, will be about the 1964th anniversary of Jesus passing into spirit, as he died on March 18th. So they followed one right after each other. So
1964.
1900 and yeah, it's in the year 29. There's a message from Dr. Samuels, and then also was confirmed from Judas as to that date, March 18th. So
that's very cool. Yes. There's your attorney mind coming up with the research, and I hope you can prove that, Dennis. Can you prove that?
Well, we have two messages, one from Dr. Samuels and one from Judas. So
yes,
two different mediums, two messages confirming March 18th.
All those who believe that evidence, then, was that sufficient? Yes? A few. Okay. All right.
So our story is a very simple one. We actually went to a non-divine love medium. We were invited to sit in a large circle where this medium was giving spirit messages to everyone in the room. There was a group of 11 of us, plus the medium. And he went around and gave the most loving messages from all the relatives and friends of all 11 of us. And just as the books that we have read described, he would describe the spirits with such detail, it left no doubt. Plus, they would discuss things that only the living person and the spirit person would know. So we had this amazing experience, and when I got out of there, I said, there's got to be more information about this spirit communication stuff. So I began a search and started looking for spirit communications. And at some point, we ended up on Jeff's website, and he had a litany of books. And we started with the books Life in the World Unseen, if you remember those
Oh,
nice,
yes.
beautiful books. Borgia, I think, was the name of the.
Anthony Borgia.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
That's
from there, obviously Jeff had the Padgett messages, and we read them from beginning to end in the version that he had on his website. You know, it's like 750 pages worth of messages, and we were just astounded. We would read them and just have our minds blown. The descriptions, and you could see his development as a medium. You could see Helen getting to the celestial kingdom in the first year, you know, from February to December. He would have friends die and then speak to him from spirit, and then you could follow their progress. I mean, it's just one of the most amazing stories that anyone could ever read. So that's how we came to it. And then we reached out. Who's talking about these Padgett messages? Well, Jeff's website led us to Alan Jean's website, and they had a forum. And the next thing you know, we had an invitation to Canada. And the rest is history.
Oh, yes, and quite a history. Ooh, yes. It's very happy for that history. Okay, of our speakers, would anyone else like to share how you came to the Padgett messages?
Bill, did you want to share?
I'll just, I'm not going to do the full blown story. It's fairly long and involved, but I'll just say that I had explored a lot of different things. I'd had various experiences that I could not explain, and so I went on all these investigations, reading all these books for years, and eventually I came to a place where I was dealing with, I'll call it internal turmoil, a really challenging time for me. And basically I was dealing with kind of like past trauma, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't know anything about healing or anything like that. And I was desperate. I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this sort of self-imposed prison that I was experiencing. And but I had this little spark of hope in me that said, you know, like maybe there's something that Jesus taught that isn't in the Bible that could help me. And I was like, huh. And this was pre-Google. This was early days of the internet. So I went and did a Netscape search, something to the effect of what Jesus said that isn't in the Bible or something like that. And fairly soon after that, I came across one of the early Divine Love sites. I don't even remember which one it was. And I started reading the messages, and I was in awe, and I just kept reading. And then the more I read them, the more I realized that here was potentially the solution to my inner struggle. And so I prayed like the messages said, and I received healing. Those things that had so deeply troubled me that I thought I would have for the rest of my entire existence, at least the way I thought of it back then, I saw no way out, and I was given that healing and that freedom through the Padgett messages. So yeah, huge fan, and yeah, so grateful for everything that allowed that to come to pass. So yeah, thanks for asking, Jean.
Life-saving. Yeah.
So I found the Padgett messages when I was in my late teens. I was always on a life after death quest. I was always really curious as to what happens when we die. And I think it was that thought, that notion that motivated me and propelled me forward to read a lot of books and reflect upon a lot of experiences and journeys that I had taken. And one of my friend's dads actually was the one who handed me my first copy of Volume 1. And ironically enough, I ran into him today a couple hours before this meeting. But their dog had died, and so we were in the burial. They were burying the dog out back at the house, and my friend's dad insisted that we all say a prayer before it was over. And when he prayed, when he said the prayer, something inside my heart just told me this guy was on to something. This guy was just something different when he prayed. And we got to talking about life after death and all that stuff. And he handed me a copy of Volume 1, and I never looked back. And much like Bill's story, I mean, I prayed and prayed and prayed and found weaknesses and strengths and was touched deeply, very deeply. And if it was not for the divine love that had found lodgment in my soul all those years ago.
Can't imagine life without it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, would anyone like to comment on all those messages? I am so grateful. Yogananda sticks out at this moment of saying that, you know, the diversity in God's universe, it's such a challenge to, you know, to think outside of our cultures and our languages and our traditions. But Yogananda's message, so much more. Anyone else like to comment on those? Hi, Charles. Hi, Luwanga from Uganda. Yay. And
Nice to see you.
yeah, he's ordained minister. And Al was the sponsor too. Wonderful to see you.
It was a pleasure.
Would anyone like to comment on the messages?
We're probably deep in prayer and didn't hear them.
Susie's ready to go, girl.
Well, I would just like to say I was amazed, astonished, and just so happy to hear that our spirit bodies were not here. It's all up beyond, and we were all gathered with, you know, James Padgett and the group above the earth plane. I was just thrilled to hear that. It was so wonderful that it can just happen. So thank you. Thank you all for the messages that came through you, Al. Appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
Miraculous.
I know David unmuted there for a minute. Did he want to say something?
Yes, I second what Susie said, but I've been doing a deep dive recently. Well, first, before let me say that all the messages today were quite outstanding, quite moving. But I've been doing a deep dive into Padgett actually from Monday. And one of the things that had intrigued me was Helen. And actually, I got to the point where when I was reading her messages, the sort of love that she was expressing for James was quite extraordinary. I mean, to the point that even although she would be commenting on a particular topic, it felt at times like it was a love letter. When you read it, it sounded more like sometimes like, was this woman must be writing a love letter to her husband. But I was pleasantly surprised when she said today, well, this is for me, because you all might have known already that James was her soulmate. So it made a lot of sense for me now why she was so affectionate in her messages to him. So that was a revelation for me. But I thought that tonight was quite outstanding, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Wow. James came this morning in our morning prayer, and actually before that, over breakfast with our guest Elaine here, I said, I wonder what sphere James Padgett passed over into, and he listened. And when he spoke this morning, I was astonished because he said he passed into the high second sphere. And that just left me very astonished. I mean, what about the laws of rapport? How could he bring through those higher truths? But to me, that is truly a miracle. And when Bill and I were discussing it and realizing he only had 8 or 9 years to pray for divine love. And
plus he was working as a lawyer and all the other things he did in his life. So
yeah,
it wasn't a long time. But I think I also got the feeling he quickly went into the third,
he said
which
that.
of course is a great launching pad into higher realms, and probably land up in the fifth pretty quick, and then the seventh, and then bang, there you are into the celestial. So I don't think it took him very long.
But what I really felt after thinking about it for a while is the potential in all of us when we go through those times where, we feel, oh, we can't feel the love, or we're down and out, or going through our challenging times. Look what was able to be accomplished with James in that short period. It's truly miraculous. And so we all have the same potential.
You could tell by the messages towards the end of his life, he received fewer and fewer, so he was dedicating less time to receiving the messages. And Jesus would even comment, you need to kind of get back in shape, you need to pray to get in rapport. So I think he kind of strayed. That was how I felt. And then James said tonight in his message something to the effect, he came within a hair's breadth of straying away from it. So that doubt, I think, was with him, and he was struggling financially. He's just trying to make a living as a senior citizen attorney in Washington, D.C. But yet, the body of his work is so amazing, and it has withstood the test of time for at least these past 100 years, and hopefully for about 1 million more.
Yeah, I'm curious where he would have landed up without the divine love and all the support from the angels, probably with his other lawyer friends, which weren't in very good conditions.
Yeah, good thing you found divine love, being a lawyer and all that.
Catherine, you want to say something, don't you? Yeah, but you're muted.
That's what I said. If these lawyers, these scrupulous lawyers of DC, of the Civil War era, if they could be saved, there's hope for me.
Yeah,
there is, Dennis. We're praying for you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I just wanted to, thank you to everyone. It's been an amazing and beautiful tribute. But I'm happy to hear that James passed into the high second, even though I'm surprised. But I'm happy because it tells me that we can have an impact. That's really all I wanted to share. It's encouraging. You don't have to be a divine love angel to have an impact and to work in rapport with angels, because he did work in rapport with angels. So even if we're not in the highest, obviously he had to pray to get his condition to that point, but it wasn't the seventh sphere.
Yeah, for all I know, I could be in the high first.
Yeah. I don't know, dear. Some days, isn't it wonderful how they can lift us all up? Is that not miraculous? And that's what they do in every circle. They're lifting us up above the earth conditions, above our own conditions, and no one is left behind. We're all lifted up together. So, anyone else?
Denise?
Yes, I too want to say thank you to everybody. It's been a real joy But I was wondering if maybe you, Al, and Jean would tell us a little bit about how you came up, to know about the Padgett messages. I've only known about them about 4 weeks myself, so I'm a real newbie, and I would appreciate to hear a little bit about your story.
Who's going first?
You go.
Kind of like Cliff, I had a real interest in spiritual things at an early age. I was about 15. I started to read Edgar Cayce and all of that stuff. And then I progressed into something that was called Jore, which was a Japanese healing modality when I was 19. And then I met a woman named Barbara Davies, who I worked with, who was a medium, and I was quite intrigued with that. So she said, well, come on over. She made me dinner, and I remember you made 3 pies, all different flavors, and said you can have whatever you want. And it was like a kid in a candy store. I've got quite a sweet tooth, so she had me at the first pie, and and she told me about divine love, and she had a Padgett book. She only had one of them, and it was her book. And she lent it to me. She said, "This is my Bible. Don't lose it." And so I read that, and I was kind of skeptical, to be honest. And it took me a couple of years to really, really get it about the divine love. Like a lot of people, if you're in your head and you've got certain ideas, and it takes a while to get beyond those ideas and into the real truth of divine love, which is the experience of receiving it. So once you receive it, then you get it. Once you have that heartfelt experience, then you're hook, line, and sinker. At least I was. Then there wasn't anything else to compare to it.
No.
So I began at a very early age. Yeah.
I'd like to jump back. How did Barbara, Al's mentor, and mine, and Terry's, and several on the screen here, she died only, Terry, 3 years ago? Two. And she mentored us all. And she found out about the Padgett messages through Alec Gaunt. And Dorothy's here on the screen. Dorothy's related, and
Dorothy isn't related.
Well,
her sister's
all
related.
right, Al, don't get technical. I'm not a lawyer. And so Alec was a great psychic, and he was told by his spirit guides that they wanted him to read a book. And they asked him to go to this used bookstore in downtown Vancouver. And so off he went, and he looked and he looked and he looked. He could not find the book. And the owner said, no, that's all the books. He said, are you sure you don't have any other book? He said, well, there's some in the back that are going to the dump, but you can have a look if you want. So Alec went in the back. Sure enough, there was a light around the book. And so that was his signal that it was the book Spirit wanted him to read. He took it home, and he thought it was way too religious for him. It wasn't. So he didn't get into it right away either. Spirit kept prompting him to go back. But when he finally got it, he was instrumental in starting up like 24 different divine love circles in the Vancouver area in the 1960s. And so many of us here on the screen give a wave if you're from the Vancouver area, and this is how we all got started. So, and what about you, Denise?
And how did you get the divine love?
You had mentioned Edgar Cayce, and that's how I mean, he kind of jump-started my spiritual journey a year ago. There's this book called A Search for God, and there's a lot in that book that coincides with the divine love message of James Padgett, a lot of oneness and being one with God, and a lot of love and serving your fellow man. I read many, many books right before I found the Padgett messages. I was reading Yogananda, and his book was so difficult for me to read, but I loved it. I was working through it. But I am curious, you mentioned Edgar Casey. Does anybody know his condition, where he might be in the spirit world, or
I think he's in the sixth sphere.
six? Okay, because in a lot of his book, he believed in reincarnation. That got me off on a whole different tangent, and same with yoga. And, so I was wondering about that. So he's in the sixth sphere. Wonderful.
And Yogananda and many of the angels are working very hard to undo the error that they taught while on earth. Denise, I know there's another question that you asked me the other day, and maybe there's some others on the screen here that would like to have a bit of a discussion on what it's like to be brought up in a traditional, strongly religious family, and then discover these truths and try to tell your family members about it, and they just are highly resistant. No, you want to add to that question? Is that something you'd like him to invite?
Well, I have to make a little correction, because I was not raised in a household like that. I had very little religious instruction in my life. And so it's my husband who is firmly attached to the idea of the Trinity. And he's very, kindly listened to me and read a lot of these messages, but he's still sticking to his guns. He doesn't like any message that, in his mind, lessens the status of Jesus from being God, So I guess I would welcome any comments from anybody, if they have any experience like that.
Okay, Louie's right into it, I can tell.
And Terry, Louie, then Terry.
Yeah, I was born with spiritual gifts, which I thought everybody had, which is pretty much a nightmare. But as I grew up, I just learned to shut my mouth, because I was brought up Catholic. Italian Roman Catholic is like a triple chastity belt for a virgin. Okay, it's like real strict. Fortunately, my mother was my father, they were liberal. So when I would talk about flying out of my body and stuff, they never told me it was wrong. So they didn't shut that door like a lot of parents do when the kids talk about what they see or experience. Well, when I began to talk to older people about my experiences, all I got back was that's demonic and that's evil, and you can't do that, and it's wrong and it's dangerous and whatever. So, but I also had a spirit guide who I called the Invisible Man. And long story short, I gradually, because I received the divine love when I was in the first grade, because a nun asked us and I got it, and it was an ongoing thing, but you don't really have a label for it. It's just this thing that's growing in you. You know it, you feel it, but you don't know what to call it. And so fast forward, as far as religion goes, I tried them all, and I ended up in Pentecostal churches because it was the only time ever that I felt so much of the power of God pour on me, to the point where I just had to tell them to stop. And that would happen all the time. So I don't know if this is like on point to what we're talking about. It's just that I understand the religion, and then Jesus was God. And then as I grew, I the pastors or the priests or what have you that I considered never a Jesus or a God, but like my Moses, my godfather. I looked up to them, and then I grew past them. And I did not let go of the fact that Jesus was God, but on the other hand, I don't know, I wasn't that committed. When I began reading the Padgett messages, there was just this connection, already having the love, but it was explaining all of those things I had to put under, all of those things I had to not lie about, but cover, all of those things that were supposed to be demonic, all those things that were supposed to be dark, all of the things where they took the Trinity and they, you know, exalted it and whatever. I didn't care one way or the other. As long as I was getting that love, I didn't care, because I would go home and almost levitate. So I was getting something. I was way getting something. And I promise you, if the lights went out in Los Angeles, I would be glowing in the dark. Because I went to that church three, four, sometimes 5 times a week, and it would take 2 to 3 hours in one direction just to get there. But it was so powerful that if you've ever been on a Disney ride where you have to like fasten your seatbelt, I knew I was going to be skyrocketed. And then my gifts began to develop, I suppose. And I just saw things. Oh my God. It's a book in itself, I know. But when people think that Jesus is God, when people think that the Holy Spirit is God, it's okay. It's okay, because sooner or later, as that love begins to develop within the soul, but also expand and then go into those recesses, they'll just have an understanding that it's like, do I really have to hang on to that idea? It comes very subtle. And the reason it's subtle is because all of the buildup that came before it through the administration of the Holy Spirit, because we're just buoyed up, like we're lifted up into another sphere or plane, even though we're sitting in our chairs, we don't feel it. And all of a sudden, boom. Yeah, you know what? The Trinity, I don't know. Do I really believe that? It's fine. And I really don't think God cares. I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah. More concerned about our souls. You have a unique story, Lou. My goodness. Terry?
You muted, dear.
Yeah, I think your question is one that we can all relate to, Denise. If we are on this path and people that we love and are close to are not open to it, and people that we're a part of, the community that we're part of, may reject it. And Louis has given examples of how searing that may be, especially for someone who's gifted spiritually as Louis is. So for each of us, the answer to this question will be somewhat unique, but I think in my own experience, I found a couple of things that are universal. And I was born to a Jewish family, raised Jewish. I was really interested in very early in the reasons for everything, and how, because it was a Jewish family I was born into, I early grappled with the Holocaust. How could a loving God allow this to happen? And that was a question that I carried with me until my teens. And I was fortunate enough to find a book written by a Rabbi Harold Kirshner, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? And in that book, I found my answer to my question. It wasn't God that ordained or caused or was the source of the Holocaust. It was free will choices that humans made. And I realized think I was 15 when I read that book, I realized that I could have been born a German, and I don't know what my choices would have been if I had been in an environment in which my family, myself, would have been at risk of death, if I helped a Jew, if I didn't join in with the prevailing norm of behavior at the time. So I really wanted to find a relationship with God, but my own religion didn't model me the kind of relationship that I was looking for. And for each one of us will have the experience of being born into one religion or another, no religion, and that religion teaching us its beliefs about who and what God is, and how he relates or she relates or God relates to the rest of us. And I just didn't fit well with me that the God of my religion would be a punitive God that smites my enemies. I didn't want my enemies smitten. I wasn't interested in that. Anyway, in my religion, I didn't find the God that I was looking for, and I kept looking and looking, and it wasn't until I'd given up the search, and this was in my early 30s, I called myself an agnostic. And I had surgery for a tumor in my brain. And when I was in the recovery room, before anything else happened, I was just waking up. I had an experience which was not of the mind. And my experience was, my life was given to me. This is how it translated to my mind. My life is a gift, and I must know the author of that gift. I must know who breathed life into me, who sustained me in life, and who sustains me now. So I began a search, and I went to Edward Casey study groups, I went to Rosicrucian groups, I went to whatever I could think of that might have the answer for me. And it was Ellie that was the answer. Ellie is the matchmaker that brought Al and Jean together. She was a wonderful lady that lived kitty corner to my apartment, and she worked at a bank, and she and I became friends after I went to see a slideshow that Al was giving about his trip to the Philippines, which I think he's talked about to a number of us who are in this community. Very entertaining story. And I, after meeting her at the slideshow, it wasn't Albert that I was interested in, it was Ellie. And we began going on walks together because we were neighbors. And early on in our friendship, I asked her, Ellie, why are you so happy all the time? Why are you so joyful and smiling? And she said, well, I have a book that I want to give you, and it'll answer your question. I don't remember if she said, because I love God and God loves me, but when she gave me Padgett's first volume, I wasn't predisposed to the language of Padgett, to how Jesus figured predominantly, because after all, I was raised Jewish. And when I was 5, I was accused of murdering Jesus in the girls' washroom in my prep school. So I wasn't predisposed with positive responses to Jesus or to Christianity, because Jews and Christians historically didn't have a very harmonious relationship, let's say. And Jews were often the victim of those of other religions, particularly Christianity. But I read 3 pages of that book, and that book said, God is love. God loves you. I shut the book, I sat in my living room, and I poured my heart out to God. I spoke out loud to God, I cried to God, and I knew enough to be quiet and to listen in case an answer came. And the answer came, and it came in such a wave of love that I knew for certainty this was not anything I manufactured. This was a gift given to me, just as my life was a gift given to me. And that started me on a search, and the first place I landed was a prayer group that Ellie hosted in her home. And then shortly afterwards, she stopped hosting that, and Barb took it over. And in order for me to be a member of the first group, she actually introduced me to Barb because Barb was the gatekeeper of that group. And if Barb saw a light over your head, then you were invited to the group. So luckily, saw a light over my head. And that's how my prayer life began, with a community, with this beautiful community that has grown and grown and grown until now. It's this community. And what I learned from that, and also from attempting to bring this message, this truth, to people that I love, to my friendship circle, huge friendship circle in Toronto where I grew up. And also being a teacher, I know that you can't teach anything to a person unless they want to learn it. You cannot engage a person in a conversation on a topic that they're not interested in, unless you're Jean. You could probably do that. Jean probably does. But
arm twisting.
I discovered that I had to go with where the person was at. And so the second thing I discovered was I am more potent as a teacher of love if I am the love. If I am the love in how I respond to them, how I relate to them, what I choose to do, how I choose to deal with challenges that I have, like the stuff that we talk about as needing to be expiated. How my self-dialogue goes is how quickly that whatever it is, it is released through the blessing of God's love. So I have learned patience. I have learned to speak about what I've experienced and know with more certainty, the stronger I feel God's love in my life. And also, I'm realizing that what I say is guided by my spirit team, by my guides and teachers. It is not from my mind exclusively. My mind is working with my soul, which is my soul is not in continual communication with God because I'm human. But I know that when I'm inspired to share things with my Jewish friends, there's a reason for it, and there's a reason how it's delivered, and it's delivered with the help of my spirit guides and teachers. And so my patience continues. I know that already in this life, and Denise, this is something that you may be very interested in, that when I pray, my ancestors are drawn to the light of the love that I'm praying for. And I've had confirmation from many people who have gifts that I do not have, that my parents, my brother, are now in higher places. I don't need to know exactly which place. It just makes me so happy that they are progressing in this way, and that hundreds and hundreds of other people in my family that I've never met but have long been in the spirit world, they benefit from my prayers and the light that God shines through me, which I can't see because I'm not gifted in that way. But
your gifts shine on and ripple out and embrace everyone you meet, Terry, and everyone who knows you. And I just hear about how loving you are all the time. And no one loves your story more than me because we've been friends with Terry for 48 years. And yeah, so she's sworn to secrecy. There's a lot of things she's not allowed to share. But I think Terry's beautiful story is the perfect way to end our discussion session. And I love this so much. There's still 21 people on after an hour.
No, 30.
Part 30. I know the number goes down, it goes
32.
up, down and up.
Oh, this is just Pat, 21.
Oh, okay. how many would like to do this again? You know, maybe we should. Oh, Louie. Oh, you think so? Okay. So, hopefully, leading up to the Divine Love Celebration, the global gathering happening in Laurelville, Pennsylvania, October the 12th to the 16th, we could have a few more opportunities like this to have discussions about divine love and our challenges of living the love. And if you're interested, please send me your questions that you think would make good topics, and we'll see if we can come up with a plan. Maybe once a month on a Friday after the Zoom circles.
So
Pardon?
that's before dinner. I'm starving at the moment.
Oh, yes. Well, my dears, if you're interested, please get in touch with me, and we'll see amongst us where the energy flows, and we'll make it happen. And then when we all meet at the global gathering, we're going to ascend into the celestial heavens. So thank you all for coming and sharing your beautiful love and prayers. God bless you all. Thank you so much.